cigarettes curling, smoking his political trap. Michael Vass roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough. He's a Republican dragon with his truthful slight, fights the battles unseen in the shadows of the night. From policy to passion, he breaks it all down, giving a voice to the voiceless, wearing his crown. Caffeine-fueled mornings, the smoke curls dance, Fluffy at his feet, giving life one more chance. Through algorithms and bias, he cuts straight and clear. Michael's roar echoes in the hemisphere. Michael Vass roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough. No sound bites allowed is his ultimate creed. A dragon's perspective where facts are the seed. Standing tall on his battlefield of thoughts, guarding the truth that others forgot. Michael Vass roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is No Sound Bites Allowed. I am your host, Michael Voss, the Political Dragon, and we are here in the Bronx on October 15th, middle of the month, getting ready for the government to reopen, getting ready for Halloween, and there's a few things that are happening. Now, I know some people will be saying, Mike, it's 8:30 on Wednesday. Aren't you normally at 8 o'clock with the Liberty First Foundation or over at the Range Report with your friend Frank Johnson? And the answer is yes, usually that's correct. But due to some technical issues, there isn't a Liberty First Foundation panel discussion, and nor am I with my good friend Frank Johnson on the Range Report. That may be next week. We have some technical issues to work out. That's fine. So I didn't really find out any of that until about 8:15. And so here I am at 8:30, and I'm going to do the show. So I know it's the middle of the week. I'm not going to try and keep you on too long, but I do want to share some thoughts with you guys. I do want to hear your feedback because I want to know what you guys think about some of the big news. And I know one of the biggest news stories right now came out of Politico, talking about the young Republicans and connecting MAGA, Republicans, Donald Trump. We're all racist, apparently. Apparently, we're supposed to all be racist, and they have the proof. But do they really? They have the argument, they have the feeling, but there's no evidence, really, of what they're saying. But then again, Democrats don't need proof. They just need accusations. And accusations equal guilt. Therefore, that's it. I mean, that's the whole Me Too movement. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I also want to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court. Two different things about the Supreme Court. In one case, the Supreme Court, well, I think they made a mistake when it comes to gender identity, but I understand why they made that mistake. And then in the other case, which was today, I believe, where Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson decided to, it's very unprofessional of her to basically just tell us what her decision is. The Supreme Court is getting questions, they're reviewing a case, and it seems that Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson has already made up her mind, already made her decision about the ruling and how she's going to rule, what the reason is for her ruling. So why are we even hearing the case? She's already done. And that's very unusual for a Supreme Court justice. So we'll talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a result of her being an activist and not a Supreme Court justice. But I'll hear what you guys have to say about that. I'm very interested in that. And oh God, there was something else I was going to bring up. I think it was Chris Murphy. Yeah, Chris Murphy. The whole thing about what's going on with ICE, what's going on with the protests. We have the No Kings protests coming up and the government being reopened. So we'll go through all of that. So let me get into it a little bit. And of course, I'm looking forward to your comments in the chat, on a regular chat, on super chats, on Rumble rants, to hear your voices, to tell me, hey, Mike, I agree, I disagree. Did you consider this or that? I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. If you're not seeing it live, leave a comment and tell me what you agree, you disagree with. I want to hear your feedback. Okay. So let's tackle the first thing first, which I think is easy enough, and that'll be with Chris Murphy, because I think he's out of his mind. I think he's very, very wrong. And here it is. So we have Chris Murphy. He is the representative for Connecticut. And as you can see, what he's saying here is we are on the verge of an authoritarian takeover in America. Now, you've heard this from people like Barack Obama. You've heard this from the left. Pretty much everyone, AOC, Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, they love to say this. Mind you, and even Governor Newsom has alluded to that America is under authoritarian rule. Donald Trump is an authoritarian. Except they don't give you any evidence. They have a feeling. And they're very, very enthusiastic in telling you how they feel. But they have no evidence for that. They can't point to the breaking of laws. They'll tell you that, they don't agree with laws, but it's not breaking the law. And a great example of this is when we see that ICE is being used, not just ICE, not just federal agencies, but National Guard. Donald Trump is using the law to activate and to introduce National Guard into cities around America. The left are saying, well, that's just authoritarian. He's building up for a military takeover of the government. And one of the people saying that are here, Chris Murphy. Except there's no evidence of that. See, Donald Trump is following the law. Laws that Democrats voted on helped to write the law. And Donald Trump isn't doing something illegal. Now, it may be unprecedented. It's not even unprecedented. We have seen people like Governor Tim Walz has used the National Guard, activated them during 2020 to enforce the lockdowns because Democrats said you can't get out of your house. In fact, even in Binghamton, New York, the county executive, Jason Garnar, someone who I personally know, Jason went on to the regional TV and said, well, yeah, he was considering passing a emergency legislation that said that you could only leave your house every other day under the lockdowns. So that's how extreme it was. That's pretty authoritarian. You can't leave your house unless the government is approved when you leave your house and for how long you can leave your house. That's pretty authoritarian. I think we should all be able to agree with that. Now, back during the lockdown, a lot of people were telling you, well, you should listen to the government because, everyone's going to die, which was a lie. Absolutely a lie, an exaggeration. Fear. Everyone was terrified of something they didn't know, and they were getting constantly new information, always correcting whatever you heard last week. By the next week, it was brand new information, contradicted what you were already told, so you didn't know what to do to protect yourself, to protect your loved ones. And the government was saying, you don't get a choice in this. You don't get to move. You get to stay in your house and be afraid. That was unprecedented. Donald Trump isn't doing that. You may not think it's okay. And the point of that was, and in Minnesota, Tim Walz used the power of being governor to activate the National Guard to make sure that, just like in Binghamton, the county executive couldn't get away with locking people in their own houses. But in Minnesota, with the power of the National Guard, Tim Walz did do that. He did have the power, and that is authoritarian. And Donald Trump isn't doing that. Donald Trump is following the law. He's not using these soldiers to go door to door and lock up American citizens. They're not even really going to door to lock up illegal aliens. They have gone to businesses. They have gone to some locations, but they're not going door to door. Now, they have executed, and actually it was ICE that executed warrants for gang members, cartel members, who were dangers to the public. And they went into an apartment building once to get that person. And they also swept the building while they were there of everyone who had a warrant and was out. And they arrested all the people with warrants, whether they were for illegal aliens or for violent crime. They arrested everyone, and people were detained for a little while, but that wasn't with the military. The military didn't do that. That was law enforcement. And again, that was by the law. They had warrants. They had people they were going after. That was legal. So when I hear people like Chris Murphy say, it's authoritarianism, what's your basis? You have a feeling. Yeah, but you felt great when you were exerting authoritarian power on the American people, and it served your party. You were in power and you were in control, and you had no problem how authoritarian your actions were. And in fact, you told people like me to shut up. In fact, under the Biden-Harris administration, as we now know, the White House, the Democrats, were going to Google and saying, you're going to silence people that mention that the lockdowns were authoritarian. They locked us down. They shut us down. They silenced us. They hit us with content strikes. Did we do anything illegal? No. The White House didn't like it. And Chris Murphy, he loved it. And he had no problem using the power of the government against American citizens when he was in power, when his people were in control. Then it was perfectly fine. And now, when no one is doing what the Democrats already did, no one has even gotten to the level of control that Democrats had in 2021, 2022. No one's there. And now they're telling us, oh, well, it's too much. Well, you ring hollow. You ring hollow, Chris Murphy. He goes on to say, this isn't the bumbling, directionless Trump first term. Well, Trump wasn't bumbling or directionless. He just did things that Democrats didn't like. But he was very directed. That's why the economy did so well, why so many people had so much money, and the government, the economy did better. Remember, it was under the Obama administration we were being told you can't get more than 1.3% growth in the government. And then the Trump administration got us 3.6% growth, which the Obama administration said, well, that was because of Obama. No, Obama said you can't do better than 1.3. He absolutely did nothing to stimulate the growth of the government. Trump did, and they tried to steal his thunder. They tried to say that was their gain. It doesn't work. So you can't tell me that the Trump administration, when he was the 45th president, that was bumbling and directionless. It was very directed. The Abraham Accords were very directed. So you can't say that. See, he's lying to you. He's lying to your face. He has nothing of substance to say, and he's also lying. He goes on to say, Chris Murphy, this time they are implementing a plan to let Trump and his people rule forever. That's stupid. The Insurrection Act is an act of law. There are conditions and terms in there which the Supreme Court will look at, every Democrat and every attorney general across this nation are looking at it, and it's not something that automatically happens. So you can't say, well, Trump just made that up. No, it's actual law. And if the terms of the law exist, as Trump is saying that it does, and that allows him to go into Portland, that allows him to go into Chicago, okay, you may not like it as a Democrat, but that's not legal, nor is it an authoritarianism, nor is it a takeover of the government. I hate when these people lie to you. And so many people don't recognize this and say, why are you lying? Look, you can be a Democrat. You can hate Donald Trump. You can say Orange Man bad all day long and tie him and say he's the problem. He's the reason for every problem in the universe. But that doesn't mean that what these Democrats are saying, it's not real. It's not true. There's just no basis for this. And the thing that makes me scared is because there's no basis, they're going to use that against you when they get power again, or someone will, because they're fear-mongering so much. It's like Chicken Little saying the sky is falling. They keep saying it and keep saying it, and no one cares anymore because they've said it for everything. All the time, every time, for a decade. No one cares anymore. So when something does happen that isn't correct, that is questionable, no one's going to notice because, for 10 years now, we've been told, well, if you're on the right, you're Hitler. If you're on the right, or you voted for Donald Trump, you believe in America first, you're some kind of Nazi, you're some kind of evil authoritarian, you are evil incarnate. That's just not realistic. It's just not true. And that's anyone with eyes that's been alive for the last decade can tell you that's just not correct. This is dangerous what Chris Murphy is doing, and I think he needs to be called out for that. By the way, we do have a couple of comments here. And so the first one I see here is John. Hello, John. John says, it was announced today that 150 people were fired from NBC News, 7% of their entire staff. NBC News has more than, that shouldn't be 7% of their staff. They have a couple thousand people that work for them. 150 is not that much. Do you think we are starting to see the final gasp of cable news? No. Cable news is not going to end overnight. That's not going to happen. I believe that you're going to continue to see cable news. TV news is pretty much dead. Now, they have the license and they'll continue to do that because ABC, CBS, NBC, it's part of their requirement for their federal television license that they have to inform the public. It is part of the public service, public service announcements. It helps to qualify as the news, having the news media. That's part of their public service announcements and notification of the public about newsworthy items. That's part of their license for ABC to exist, for NBC, for CBS to exist. So the news is always going to be on those. They may be smaller, but they will always exist. They may be doing more aggregate, like they'll watch the news and they'll just cover what the news aggregate. They'll be more like Yahoo in terms of the news, and they'll just read whatever the aggregation is, but they'll still exist. In terms of cable, they're not going away. A lot of people, you're looking at least for another 20, 30 years. Basically, you got to see my generation die. My youngest sister is in her 40s, and she grew up alongside me and my mother, and that generation. So she's at the I'm Gen X, I think. I don't know. It's weird. And so I think she's that would make her millennial, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure. So you have to see this generation, people who are 40 and older would have to die essentially, before cable news will be over. It's kind of like right now, the last people who are still watching, say, late night TV, the last people who are watching CBS on their television, on regular, not cable, but just regular CBS. Well, those are people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s right now. When they die off, no one's going to be watching news on TV, on ABC, CBS, NBC. When my generation dies off, which is about 30 years from now, well, then no one's going to be looking at cable anymore. They're going to be the older people, my sister and those below, so 40 and under, they're going to probably be looking at social media and whatever captures the attention in the next 10 years. Something's going to be the main way people get news. Even if it's on social media, it'll be some kind of platform, and that will be the new thing. And that'll be true for 20, 30 years. And then we'll be on to the next thing. So that's what I think will happen. So no, cable news will not disappear for another 30 years. But I do think, John, that they're going to be less impactful. Less people will pay attention. Less people will care. That's to answer your question there. Shelley says, it's like Chuck Schumer, in reference to Chris Murphy, it's like Chuck Schumer calling the government shutdown a Trump shutdown, lying because no one is calling him out. Yeah, it's true, Shelley. You're right. We hear these things. Chuck Schumer loves to try and say, him and Hakeem Jeffries want to convince the public that, wait, this is all the Republicans' fault. This is all Donald Trump's fault. Now, they are correct in saying, well, the buck stops at the president. Everything that happens under President Obama, or everything that happened under President Biden, or everything that happens under President Trump is effectively part of his administration. It is his fault. Like when the IRS, when Lois Lerner in the IRS was abusing her power and targeting American citizens based on their political affiliation, that's a strike against Obama. That's the Obama administration. That was his negative. That's his scandal. That counts for Obama. Doesn't matter that Lois Lerner was the one doing it. She's part of the Obama regime. It's an Obama problem. So when you say, well, the government shut down, Trump's in office. So ultimately in history, this is a Trump shutdown because it happened in his administration. You could say that, but that's being very technical and playing with the words. And that's history. But in the real world, real time, right now, for you and me living this moment, it's not the Trump administration. It's not Republicans. All the Republicans, I've said this many times, I've shown the evidence, I've shown the votes. The Republicans have voted to open the government. Democrats, and Democrats alone, have voted to close the government. You cannot tell me this is a Republican problem when Democrats are the ones who are keeping the government closed. They're voting in a block against opening the government. Republicans have voted in a block in unison to open the government. You can't say the people who are trying to open the government are the bad guys and keeping the government closed. You can't say that. But yet Schumer has said that, Hakeem Jeffries has said that, because they think the American public are stupid. And they think if they just say it enough and they get MSNBC and CNN and the news media to say the same thing, that people will eventually believe it. It's not true. Doesn't matter how many people, you need to have 10 times as many people saying a lie as saying the truth. But yes, so you made a great point there, Shelley. Thank you for that. John came back with a different comment. He goes, the New York Times reported that it was, in fact, 7%, that the 7% of the staff of NBC have been laid off since they split from MSNBC and CNBC. Now there's MS Now, which would make you think it's, Ms. Now. So you would think it's maybe part of the National Organization of Women. It's not. It just means that MSNBC was absolutely unprofitable. It was losing too much money. Mind you, most news organizations lose money every year. That's why I'm not profitable on my own. That's why I have to have another job. And that's true of most people who do politics and news, even on social media. It loses money. It's not exciting like movies or doing entertainment reviews and such, or video games. If you're talking about the news, you usually lose money. It's just weird that works out that way. So I'm not surprised they split off. Basically, NBC is shrinking its size of the loss. They got rid of MSNBC because they lost them money by the boatload. And same thing for CNBC. They lost the money by the boatload because they were very biased. They were just propagandists. Now they got rid of the propagandist, and all they're left with is a much smaller need for the news team. So they're going to whittle it down. So I'm not surprised. But again, they're not going to go away, I believe, until you see another 30 years. So Rick is with us. Hey, Rick. And Rick is leaving a comment. And Rick says, pet axiom number 1. People judge outside groups by their worst examples. Kind of. Yes. People do tend to judge any group by the worst. But see, that's not really true, because when I talk about Antifa, maybe it's just me, but when I'm talking about Antifa, my derision and dislike and disgust with Antifa isn't the same as my disgust for communism. They're two very different things. Mind you, it may be discussed, but I don't blame Democrats for what the communists do. I don't blame rank and file Democrats for what Antifa does. Antifa are radical terrorists. Communism is a failed ideology. Democrats, they're misguided. In many cases, most of the time, they're ill-informed and misguided or led by their emotions. I don't blame them for that. So I don't blame, just because someone I know, most Democrats in general, they're getting their news from MSNBC or MS Now, whatever they want to call themselves. That doesn't mean that they're responsible for the actions of Antifa. They're not responsible for the radical protesters over in Chicago attacking ICE for doing their job. I don't blame them for that. So I get what you're saying, but I don't exactly agree with that. And again, maybe that's just me. I'm a little different than many people. Rick goes on to say, Rick goes on to say, cable news makes bank from pharmaceutical companies. A lot of things make money from pharmaceutical companies. It's one of many. You know what? People love to pick on this corporation or that corporation, and they're like, this is the bad guy of the week. It used to be the tobacco companies. Now it's pharmaceutical companies. Back about 10, 15 years ago, it was the banking industry. It could be the green industry. There's always a corporation that people are going to point to and go, they're the bad guys. 9 out of 10 times, they're not the bad guys. They're most large companies. I'm talking the major national companies. They're apathetic. They don't care. They just want money. They just want to make money. And the government gives them lots of opportunities to make money. And so they take advantage of that, like any business would. I don't blame them for that. That's not their fault. It's the fault of the government, and more importantly, individuals in the government, the lobbyists in the government, that are taking advantage of that. The independent organizations that take advantage of the loopholes that politicians have purposefully put in there, and corporations take advantage of. If I can send Chris Murphy or Elizabeth Warren, and I can send them on a cruise through the Mediterranean, and it's going to cost me 50, 70, $100,000. But now they're going to vote on my side, like Elizabeth Warren. She took $180,000 from pharmaceutical companies, and then she goes out and yells at RFK Jr. for trying to make the public aware of something that is on the label of Tylenol bottles. Think about that. A lot of people didn't think of that. Elizabeth Warren was screaming at RFK Jr., the Secretary of the Health and Human Services, because there was a study done by Harvard. And in reaction to that, the Secretary of Health and Human Services told the American people that pregnant women probably shouldn't have Tylenol. He didn't make it a law. And again, this goes back to Chris Murphy. It wasn't authoritarian. Women weren't told they can't have Tylenol just because they're pregnant. No one was stopped. Tylenol is still being made. It's still being sold. No one got stopped. All he said is there seems to be a correlation, as cited by Harvard, between Tylenol and autism. Okay, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing for him to do. But Elizabeth Warren was screaming at him, how can you possibly say that? Well, it says it on Tylenol's bottle. If you got a bottle of Tylenol, read it. And it tells you pregnant women should speak to their doctor before using Tylenol. They've been saying that since the 70s. The warning's been on the bottle since, I think, the mid-80s. This is not new. He just confirmed that what people thought might be true seems to have a study, and the government is making people aware. But Elizabeth Warren, she took advantage, or rather, she was required to take advantage by the pharmaceutical companies to stand up for them when information was being given to the public so that they could make their own mind up. And just like the women, you notice all the women who were chugging the Tylenol, they were on TikTok and they're like chugging down bottles of Tylenol, even though they're pregnant. And one woman died because of that. And by the way, her baby died too. But because she was chugging just a bottle of Tylenol because she's stupid. And she wanted to virtue signal and make a point. Orange man bad, RFK bad. What do they know? They're not doctors. They're also not stupid enough to chug a bottle of Tylenol. Anyone, including men, you do that, you're going to be in a hospital. They're going to be pumping your stomach and your blood system because you're poisoning yourself. It's a dumb thing to do. But they did it. And no one arrested anyone for that. No one, the RFK didn't shut down the factories for Tylenol. No one pulled them from the stores. You can still go to your local grocery store or bodega. You can go anywhere and you can still buy Tylenol, even though a pregnant woman died and many others got sick because they were stupid. So it's not authoritarian. It just is what it is. So again, I don't blame the pharmaceutical companies for the stupidity of laws created by members of government. So thank you for that. And by the way, John is with us with the algorithm. He's reminding me to let you guys know that we need to, if you can, please like, share, subscribe. My big show is on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Wednesdays, I'm usually with a panel, and I'm talking with the panel about everything, and we're going back and forth. That's the Liberty First Foundation. That's the Range Report. My good friend Frank Johnson or Dow Grimm or Jan Rains will join me. So that's usually what happens, but that's okay. Just letting you know. So please do like, share, and most of all, subscribe. I want to try and get to 5,000 subscribers. The closer I get to 5,000 subscribers, I can get Larry Sharp, who's running for governor. I can do an interview with him. I can get people like Curtis Sliwa, who's running for mayor of New York. I can do an interview with him. I can get an interview with Zoran Mandami. The closer I get to 5,000 subscribers, the more these guys are going to say yes to me. It's very difficult. We've done a lot of interviews over the years, but it's hard. And The closer we get to 5,000, 10,000 subscribers, the easier that becomes. All right, that being said, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but I also wanted to go into, let's see, let me talk about, there it is. I got the news here. So let me show you this, because you've probably heard about this. Excuse me. The I Love Hitler article from Politico. And this article, which I believe is written by Jason Bieferman. Okay, that's an interesting name. Jason Bieferman and Emily Nagol. And so their article, which is, I truly believe, if you look at this, you can look at this article for yourself. And I know New York Post and other news organizations are talking about it now. Came out about 2 days. It came out on Sunday. And they're saying, oh, this is a leaked message. And it just shows you young Republicans are racist. There are a bunch of racists. No, they're not. No, they're not. And what they found doesn't show us that. And I know right now everyone is dogpiling. When this news came out, one of my very good friends got in touch with me, someone I know in politics. They got right in touch with me. They're like, oh my God, this is going to explode in people's faces. The young Republicans across the nation they're done. They're done as an organization. The New York Young Republicans, they're decimated. They're going to disappear. This is the end of their organization forever. And I said, no, I don't think so. No, I don't think that's going to happen. This will blow over. And in part because it's not true. It's not real. And some people are starting to really look at the article. And if the first time you read it, you're just absorbed with, oh my God, they're just racist. They're just Nazis. They're just authoritarian. Oh, read it again. Read it again without that emotion. Read the article and really stop paragraph by paragraph. If you initially read it and were like, those Republicans are evil, read it again. Read it one paragraph at a time. And really look at the paragraphs, because what you think it said, it didn't say. See, right here, leaked messages expose young Republicans' racist chat. Was it a racist chat? Well, there were racist words in some of the chats, but it wasn't 7 months of just racism. They want to set up the impression in your mind that every time these young Republicans decided to talk to each other, well, then it was racist. It was obviously racist. Lots of racism. No. That's not true. But that's the mental image they want you to have, because we know Politico is biased against Republicans and conservatives. Not as bad as, say, Axios, not as bad as the Huffington Post, not as bad as MSNBC, but they are left of center. And I don't mean left leaning, they're left of center, and they don't like Republicans, Donald Trump, MAGA, America First. They don't like that. And they love to put out articles that hurt that. And this was meant to be an October surprise. This was meant to help the New York election for Zoran Mandami and the Democrats. That's why they came out with this. They've had this article for 7 months. They could have told the American people about this at any time they wanted to. They didn't want to do that because they didn't see the advantage. They didn't do that because it wouldn't have helped Democrats win an election if they announced it back in June or July or August. You wouldn't remember it today, because they know that the general public, when it comes to politics, the news stories you only remember about 3 months. Anything more than 3 months ago, most people don't remember. Or if they do remember it, they remember it wrong. That's just the truth of it. Most people don't remember. They remember, oh, Dr. Fauci, he he was in charge of something. He was in charge of our health. He was in charge of our response to the pandemic. And they were, but I don't remember. Yeah, they don't remember the fact that he was doing illegal experiments on puppies, beagles, tying them down and letting mosquitoes eat the puppies to death. That they would surgically remove the vocal cords of those puppies so that the scientists didn't have to hear those puppies screaming in pain every day until they die. No, that was too much for the scientists. So they just took away their ability to cry and make sound as they allowed the mosquitoes to eat those beagle babies, let them die that way. And that was Dr. Fauci. Oh, you forgot that story. You forgot that that's the guy who was responsible for that. And that changes the way you look at all of his other decisions, right? Because that's pretty evil, wouldn't you say? To do that to dogs, to innocent dogs, baby dogs, young puppies, and to cut out their vocal cords to tie them down as they're being tortured. That's a pretty devious mind. And this is what Dr. Fauci authorized. He's not a good guy. He's not a good guy. And that not good guy made bad decisions in 2020, 2021, 22. He made bad decisions that hurt American citizens. But you don't remember that. And see, I'm saying that to remind you of what you forgot. And that's what the news media is counting on. They're counting on you not remembering. They want you to remember the emotion, not the reason. So they want you to remember that, Republicans are racist and they're Nazis. They don't want you to remember the detail. So that's where this article came from. It was supposed to change the way elections would be seen across America in 2025, and hopefully to make you think that Republicans are untrustworthy in 2026 when you're just remembering the feeling and don't remembering the details, so that Democrats can win because it's the midterm elections. That's what this article is about. Now, people are going to tell me, but Mike, you're helping Nazis. You're a Nazi. And yes, people do tell me to my face. Well, not to my face. Online, people will tell me all the time, Mike, you're just a Nazi. I'm like, do you ever see you ever seen a video of me? You ever seen my picture? I don't think so. But okay, yeah, they say these kind of stupid things, but their point is you're being evil. You're helping evil people. They don't know what they're talking about. Like this. Second line in this, it says in the political article, it says thousands of private messages, thousands, actually tens of thousands of messages reveal young GOP leaders. They're not that young. We're talking about people who are on average about 22 years old. Some of them are as old as 26. I think the oldest person in the article was discussed is about 26. And I think the youngest person is about 20. So we're not talking about 16-year-olds. So young adults, yes. Joking about gas chambers, slavery, and rape. You can, and many people have, made jokes for decades now about gas chambers, slavery, and rape. Richard Pryor is a great example, made jokes about slavery. Matter of fact, almost every black comedian, every national level black comedian has made some kind of joke about slavery at some point. Lots of them do. There have been movies that make fun of it. There was that movie with Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy, and he's from the Boys, Bad Boys. What's his name? Martin Lawrence. That's it. Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy. They were in a very comedic movie that had to do with, abusing black people, illegally charged with the crime, and they spent life. That was the name of the movie, life. They were life in prison in the South and they were going to live in a chain gang and they could never get out. And they were innocent. That was a big comedy. It was a comedic movie. Lots of jokes about two black men wrongly convicted of a crime and punished for their lifetime. And the movie is about decades of them being basically tortured, innocent men. So you can make jokes about gas chambers, slavery, and rape. Is that something that is a good thing? Not necessarily. It is pretty dark humor. It is black humor, as they call it, or dark humor if you want. It's not a black comedy. It's gallows humor. But in the right context, depending on in that moment, not a big deal. I can tell you for a fact that if you were listening to some of the conversations I was having when I was in the Marine Corps in my 20s, you would think it was pretty dark. If you listen to some of my jokes and some of the things I've talked to my friends about after I came back from Russia, right after the coup attempt by the communists, my humor was pretty dark. And you could say that about people who've survived or were talking about events in their life like the earthquake, the Northridge earthquake, being hit by a car, being homeless. Yeah, gallows humor does exist. And in context, it can be if you make a joke, it sounds dark and mean, but it's funny for you and your friends in context. That's what we're seeing here. I bring all of that up to make sure you're in the proper mindset to understand. That's what we're looking at here. This article, which tells us that these are private messages on Telegram. So this isn't something for the public. These are a bunch of people talking amongst themselves, friends to some degree, and colleagues, and obviously good colleagues that they could personally talk about their lives and their life stories with each other. So some degree of friendship exists there. They're talking amongst themselves, and they referred to people in some horrible ways. And like I think the guy Nick is one of them who referred to black people as watermelon people. Yeah, I'm not happy with that one. I'm not happy with it. Did he have a right to say it? Yes. Yes, he does. He absolutely has a right to say it. He's an American citizen, First Amendment. It is his right. I'm offended by it? Absolutely I am. Does he get to say it? Yes, he does. And the fact that he did it in a private message, not a problem. That's his right. We can't be upset about that. If you're upset that he said something like that, you can be upset at what he said. I find that watermelon people, that is offensive. I cannot be upset with him about having said it. It's his First Amendment right. That also doesn't mean that I have to be his best friend. I don't have to associate with him. I don't have to talk with him. I don't have to work with him because I find what he said offensive. But that doesn't mean that I have to shut down all of whatever business he's working with, any politician he's working with. That doesn't mean that they all are suddenly evil people and I have to shut them all down. That's not how it works. That's the sins of the father affecting the son. We don't do that in America. There's a reason for that. Was it meant as a joke? Yes. See, if you go through this entire argument, here's my biggest problem with this. There are some 70,000 comments over 7 months, tens of thousands of comments. And we are getting five comments from 3 different people, a conversation, a piece of a conversation from 3 or more people. And we're coming in the middle of that. And we're being told, look, they said this word. Yeah, they said an offensive word. I got you. What's the context? What did they say 5 minutes before? What's the conversation for the last 5 minutes that get us to this conversation that they suddenly drop us in the middle of? What's the relationship between all of these people that are telling us, look at what they're saying there? Yeah. Who are these people? What have they been saying to each other for the last 7 months? Is this meant to be a joke? Is this meant to be serious? See, you don't know the answer to any of that. Maybe they're being sarcastic. Here's the thing. You can't tell me what the intonation is in a text. How many boyfriends, how many girlfriends have broken up because you send a text message to your significant other, and what you thought was a joke, they read it and they get pissed off. Oh, you can't tell me that doesn't happen. It happens every day all across America, where some significant other gets a text and one of them finds it to be absolutely offensive and repulsive, and the other member of that relationship may have thought that they were being very funny. Happens every day because there's no intonation, there's no context to a bunch of words on a phone. I could say it to my significant other and they would laugh. They might think it's funny. But if they just see a bunch of words on a phone, they don't get any of the humor that I'm presenting with that. Same thing with you reading this text message, this poor part of a text message. You have no concept of whether they were laughing when they were sending this back and forth. You don't know that whoops, where is that? Bring it back. Whoops. Where is it? There it is. Okay. So after this line right here, we got to pretend that we like him. Hey, come on in, take a shower, boom, boom. Is that dark? Is that rude? Absolutely. Can you dislike it? Absolutely. You don't know what's the very next thing that's said in that chain. Why did they cut it there? Why don't they let us see what was the reaction by everyone else in this text chain, in these thousands of messages? Why don't they show us what was said next? That went too, because maybe the very next thing that's being said is, you went too far. That wasn't funny. That was too much. You know what? I can't talk to you guys right now. I need a break. You don't know what was said next because they won't show it to you, because they want you to be biased. The reason why they start the conversation at this line and they end it right there is so that you only get the emotion they want you to have. You don't know if they're joking. You don't know if they got rebuffed, if they got rebuked for taking the joke too far because it went too dark. This is propaganda. Now, I should mention, I do know one of the people in this news article. I know Bobby Walker. I've known him since 2018. Yeah, since 2018. I have met Bobby Walker. I've talked with him. I've been at events with him. We've occasionally sent each other text messages. Not because he's not my best friend. I didn't get invited to his wedding or any of his events. Professional. We would see each other occasionally professionally at various events. We were very cordial. Talked every so often, infrequently online. I can tell you this, Bobby Walker, you can say a lot of things about him. I wouldn't call him a racist. I have absolutely no reason to believe that he's a racist. Is he as funny as in person? Is he as funny with all his jokes as he thinks it is? No, he's never been that funny. He jokes around. He's a happy-go-lucky kind of a guy. In my experience with him, was he racist? No. Was he as funny as he thought he was? No. But he was far from being Hitler Youth. Far from being Hitler Youth. But he's being made out to be that way, and I think it's wrong. I think it's incorrect. They're going to destroy people's lives because they want you to be biased. This was a political hit piece, and if you look it through, you may not like what was said, but it doesn't mean that they're racist. It doesn't even get close to that. One of the things they mention in this article, out of these 15,000 member organizations, out of these thousands of of chats going back and forth. There were words that were used 251 times. 251 times over 7 months with thousands and thousands. If they were the new Hitler Youth, you would expect that every day they'd be talking about being Hitler Youth. You would expect that there would be thousands upon thousands of mentions of these words. We're talking about less than 1%. What's more likely? And even given the examples that they're providing to us in these comments, is it more likely that there was some gallows humor, misplaced humor, bad, unfunny jokes? Was it more likely that, or was it them being Hitler Youth on something that they said maybe once in 7 months? Maybe it was something that was said twice in 7 months. And it was a joke in both of those times. Now, I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I think it's important for us to understand. I think it's important for us to understand that there is a reason why news media make a mountain out of a molehill and they demonize an organization. The Young Republicans National Organization, they're falling apart. The New York organization has basically shut its doors. And I think they should walk on to the news media and go, I said it. It was a joke. It was a bad joke. So what? It's private. I can make a bad joke. Oh, but you said a bad word. So what? Have you ever heard what Antifa says about Republicans every day? Have you ever heard what some of the people on the far left say about Republicans, MAGA, Donald Trump every single day? Do you want to see some of the text messages I receive, some of the emails that I receive, some of the comments I receive, especially when I ran for elected office? Yeah. Oh, someone used a bad word. Okay. They made a bad joke. Okay. It was a bad idea. Okay. How does that make every other Republican, every other member of MAGA, every person all the way up to Donald Trump, how does that make Donald Trump an evil, bad person? Well, there was a professor who studies white people, and he said that when Donald Trump, a white man, he says naughty things that I don't like, that means that every other young white man will say those things too. That is a stupid statement. But he's got a PhD, Mike, and that makes him a doctor of bull. Means nothing. That's stupid. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has nothing to do with MAGA. It has nothing to do with Republicans. At the very best that they can argue from that political article is you could say, yeah, 5 people. 5 people. If you really want to go with it, 5 people are Hitler Youth. That's it, 5. Not the New York Young Republicans, not the National Young Republicans, not Donald Trump, not MAGA, not Republicans, not conservatives. 5 people. That's it. That's it. That's the only thing you can truly say. But that's not what they said in that article. That's not what they made you feel in that article. And that is evil because they did that to change your vote. Because Democrats have nothing of substance to stand on. They have nothing that they can present to you that would make you want to vote for them in 2025 and potentially in 2028. Even Democrats don't want to hear Democrats. They don't trust Democrats. They remember what happened in the last 4 years under Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democratic Party. And so they need to lie. They need to manipulate you emotionally. They have to fill you full of propaganda just so that Democrats can be competitive. And that is evil. That is wicked. And that is something that we should be talking about, and the news media isn't, because they have a vested interest. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative Republican. I know Bobby Walker. I've told you these things. I've never hidden them from you. So you know where I stand, and you can say, well, Mike doesn't understand. He's just a sellout. I wish I did, because I'd have more money. I'm not. Oh, Mike, he's just deluded. He's a slave to the Republicans. Come on, really? That's just so ludicrous. It's not even worth arguing about. It's stupid. But you hear these arguments to try and justify the feeling the left has, because they want to be mean. They want to be angry. They want to win, and they have nothing to substantiate it. Okay, let me go back to the comments, because I know there was a couple of comments in there. So let's see. Let's start with Shelley says, Hitler was a socialist, so it's odd that Democratic leaders are trying to peg the Republicans as Nazis. That's true. Democratic nationalists were the Nazis. Nazis are Democratic Socialists, and there is the Democratic Socialists in America. The DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, are closer to the Nazi Party than the Republicans. That's just a fact. The DSA hates that. AOC hates when someone points that out. But the National Socialist Party of Germany is closer to the Democratic Socialists of America than they are to any other organization in America. That's just a fact. So you're right, Shelley. Absolutely true. Let me see here. Shelley goes on. Let's see. Shelley's talking with Phil, and Phil's talking with her. Phil says, Kevin Hart's ancestors used to deadlift cotton, as stated by Tony Hinchcliffe. Okay, I don't know who Tony Hinchcliffe is. Should I know him? I don't know. But yes, I'm assuming that Tony Hinchcliffe is a comedian, and he made a statement. Kevin Hart's ancestors used to deadlift cotton. Well, true. And that could be a joke. I don't know. Phil says, he goes on to say, what was his other name? I forgot to. I don't remember. All soldiers have gallows humors. Yeah. Ask anyone who served in Afghanistan, anyone who served in Iraq, anyone who's been under fire. Ask just about any Marine anywhere. Ask people in the submarine service. They'll tell you, gallows humor, that's real. That is absolutely. The more oppressive the duty station or the conflict you are involved in, the more the gallows humor will exist. That was true in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It's true in the Iraq War, in Afghanistan. It's true everywhere. This is not something that is not known. So there is that fact. Let me go on. Oh, hey, by the way, Phil, thank you for supporting the channel. People, you can see it right now. Phil had given us a super chat of $2, which I appreciate intensely. Thank you. That helps to keep the channel going. And he said, it's like in the movie, My Cousin Vinny. And he goes, I shot the clerk. Yeah, that is true. Let's see, what else we got here? Thank you for that, Phil. Thank you for the $2. That really does matter, and I do appreciate that. Shelley goes, if I was in prison, I'd like to be able to joke about it to cope with it. Many people do. Many people cope and make jokes of it. Great example, Nerdrotic, Gary Beagler. He, in a very non-serious way, very often, will speak about the fact that he was in jail. He had gotten arrested. He was a drug addict at the time. He recovered since. But at one point in his life, he made all the wrong decisions. He was a drug addict and he got arrested. And he was in jail. He served time, hard time in jail. He got out. He got clean. And he is clean to this day. He's rebuilt his life. And he's married and has kids and he's successful. He's a successful, great story of someone who turned his life around. And I appreciate and respect Gary Beagler, Nerdrotic, who I've met once in person. I met him once and I have great respect for what he's done with his life. But yeah, he jokes about prison all the time. His friends, if you watch Friday Night Tights, if you look at his his show with Az versus Babyface, it's called The Real BBC. And with Mahler on there, they joke about Gary in both of those institutions. You got 10, 15 people making fun at Gary sometimes about him being someone who was formerly in prison, of him being a prisoner, of his former addictions. And Gary laughs at it because sometimes they're very, very funny. Often very dark, very inappropriate. So again, if you take that out of context, sounds horrible. Put it in context, not so bad. Let's see here. Let's go on. Phil says sometimes something written lacks the tone to provide context. Often. And especially when you limit that to 140 or so characters, yeah, you don't get a lot of context in one sentence offhand. It's true. Shelley says, the two Utes. Everybody wants to talk about my cousin Vinny. That's funny. Okay. Joel has joined us. And Joel says, I was in a chat group for New York Citizens Audit. Okay. I know that organization did a great job showing that there are massive errors in our election system in New York State, not unlike many other states as well. And New York State refuses to review the documentation, the data that New York City Audit has tried to provide to them because they know it's true. They know it's true that our entire election system is corrupt in New York State. But anyway, Joe goes on to say, they policed the chat for easily misunderstood comments because they knew the chat would wind up in court at some point. And it was subpoenaed. Of course. And that's the problem. There's always going to be someone who's going to find that one sentence, that one line, and go, see, that means they're evil or they're planning to do something bad, and you've got to hate them. I don't hate Antifa because of a single statement. I hate Antifa because of the many, many, many statements they have made over many years that lead me to believe that there is a trend and opinion, not just one thing. I'm upset with Hamas, and I call Hamas a terrorist organization, like I do with Antifa, because Hamas has a written constitution, a mission statement that tells you that they want to commit genocide against those that don't believe what they believe. They have gone on to news programs for 2 decades telling everyone that they want to commit genocide, and then they have actually fought wars to commit genocide. So when I say I don't trust Hamas and they are a group of terrorists, well, it's because of what they've done over the last 2 decades, not because of one sentence. So, I mean, that is something you have to take into context. Let's see. Joel says, Liz Joy fell for the rhetoric on this story. She put out a statement disavowing all of these kids, these young adults, and swearing none of them will be allowed to work with her. Liz Joy is an idiot. She's an idiot. First of all, anyone and everyone in politics has been taken out of context at some point. Any statement they have made has been blown up and used against them and their party. This is true for Chuck Schumer as it is for everyone, Bobby Walker and everyone else, anyone in between. So if you're smart, you would actually sit them down and have a conversation with them. If they were someone you were going to consider for a job, you would actually have a conversation with them and find out from their own mouth what is and isn't true. At least try to get a better understanding, to at least filter out what is the propaganda and what is the reality. Look, I understand. Bobby lost his job. Bobby Walker, as reported by Politico and I believe the New York Post. Bobby Walker was going to work on a campaign in central New York. Bobby's from New York, upstate New York, and he was going to work on a political campaign for someone running for Congress. And then this news broke and he lost the job. I get that. And that has to happen because that campaign is afraid that all of this negative media is going to attach the campaign. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year. I mean, it's a midterm race. Maybe in January, maybe in April, they go back and say, oh, yeah, no one's paying attention anymore. No one cares. Bobby, you're good at what you do. Let's hire you now because no one's paying attention anymore. Maybe they do that. That might happen, and I hope that does happen for Bobby because right now he's being railroaded for something that's unfair and unjust. He's being prevented from doing something that he has worked at for many years. And just because he has some bad jokes, some distasteful comments, that I guarantee you, if we go through, look at the internet right now, look at all the internet trolls you know, for whatever side of the political spectrum. Look at some of the things that you've heard. We have a Virginia gentleman, Jay Jones, who's running for the Virginia Attorney General, who released a statement saying he wants to kill his opponent's wife, his opponent's 2 children. This is what he said. It wasn't a joke. He was saying that to one of his colleagues, very much like what we see with Politico, except this wasn't a joke. It wasn't a dark statement. And we don't need 7 months of comments that we don't get to see to find out. Jay Jones, the Virginia Attorney General candidate for the Democratic Party, he admitted, he did say that. He did say that he wanted to kill his opponent, that he wanted to kill his opponent's wife. He wanted to kill his opponent's 2 young preschool children. That's evil. That's someone who shouldn't be in an election. And Spamberger, she wouldn't even say the simple thing of, I denounce, not only did she denounce that, but she wouldn't support this guy running because that was evil, what he said. She wouldn't even denounce that. She was given 4 chances in the Virginia debate for governor to denounce this guy, to denounce and to say this guy should not run because he wants to kill his enemies and his enemies' children. Is that the same as what we see from Politico? Because Politico wants you to believe this is worse. That the Politico news, that these young men, these 5 young men, are worse than that guy who wants to be Attorney General of Virginia. And I'll tell you right now, there is no comparison. But Democrats need you to feel like they're the same. They need you to feel that this is connected to Donald Trump. Those 5 young men are not connected to Donald Trump. They have no influence with Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't influence them. They made decisions on their own. But those 5 men, they don't enforce the law in the state of New York or Arizona or New Hampshire. They don't. They don't write the law in any of those states. They don't influence the politicians who do that. You know what? The Attorney General of Virginia does. Which one's more important, do you think? Which story is trying to be buried as we speak? No one, the Democrats aren't telling you right now, the guy who's running for Attorney General in Virginia, yeah, he should be out of the job. He should be kicked out. They're telling you that these kids, in these comments that are full of jokes, whether you like them or not, these kids can't have a career for the rest of their lives. But the guy who wants to kill children, he's fine. You have to elect him. You have to vote for him because he's a Democrat. And how dare you not vote for a Democrat in Virginia? You have to vote for him, even though he wants to kill your kids if you happen to be of the other political party. But those kids who are making jokes amongst themselves and have no influence over politics, guess what? Yeah, they don't get to have a job for the rest of their lives. Do you see why this is just so wrong? It's so wrong. All right, let me move on. Phil says, yeah, the pearl clutching is a bit much, and I thought the Republicans had learned from Donald Trump to fight back. They haven't learned their lesson back. This isn't about fighting back. The simple answer is just let it go. Just say, no, I did it. I wrote it. And if you looked at the full context, in fact, show the full context. Demand that Politico show a full context of the conversations. Go, yeah, I said it, and show the full conversation. And here's the joke I made. And by the way, show me. And here's the comment when someone said I went too far with my joke. Here's the statement when someone said that wasn't funny. Let me show you the full context of the entire conversation, not just an edited select part of it. And by the way, it's biased. No. Let's have the real conversation. They should stand up and say, no, print everything. Print all 7 months. You've got these things from an unknown anonymous source, which already automatically makes me think something is dubious here. You have 7 months of conversations and you won't tell me who said it? What was their agenda? What was the reason that they collected 7 months of data and now they're dumping it on your doorstep? Why did they do that? There's an agenda here, obviously. What is that agenda? To get Democrats to win? I don't know. Money? I don't know. Was someone paid off for that 7 months of data? How long did Politico know about this? Were they getting monthly updates? Every week they would get another download of information for the next 7 months. And Politico has been waiting until they got enough, what they thought was enough juicy stuff just before an election so that they could reveal this to you. Because why didn't they say this in April? Why didn't they say this in March? If this was such a terrible, horrible, bad thing for America, if it was so terrible that it was going to change the way politics are done in America, if it was going to influence the youth of America and make them more racist, why didn't they tell us this in the first month that they got the data, the second month that they got the data, the third month that they got the data? Maybe because it didn't have anything in it that was actually offensive. Maybe because they knew it wasn't a big deal. Because it wouldn't help Democrats win the election in 2025. It just annoys me, folks. And it's just something that I find is disgusting. It is disgusting. There's something else that's disgusting to me. And I want to share it with you. We're going to be ending soon, but I do want to share these things about the Supreme Court. You may have heard about this. Now, the Supreme Court has made the decision that they will not address or take or review a court case about the gender identity of children. There is a court case which happens to be Lee versus Poudre School District R-1. Okay. And this is a gender identity case. The school, the district, is hiding from parents that they're trying to trans the kids, that they are teaching kids. They're using different names for the kids. So behind the parents' back, the teachers are going to call kids. If your name is Joe, well, they're going to call you Susie in the classroom. And they're going to try and teach you about transgenderism and gender liquidity and all these things that you can't discuss with your family. And they tell you, don't talk to your mom about it. Come to a classroom and we'll tell you why you feel so different, why you feel so strange. Come over after class, after school, and come to this room and we'll talk to you about chopping off your genitals and becoming something different, from transforming yourself and doing so by taking pills and having surgeries and altering your body forever. That's what the school district was doing behind the parents' back. effectively lying to parents about what's happening with their kids in that school. Literally lying to them. Yeah, Johnny's doing fantastic, except, when he's in the classroom, then we call him, Melissa. Well, that's a pretty big thing. Yeah, your kid? Yeah, your kid Frank? Yeah, he's doing fantastic, except he wants to not only learn ballet, but he thinks his name is Tina. He wants to chop off his genitals. And we talked to him about how he can chop off his genitals in the app. When you thought he was going to football practice, no, he's coming over to the gender equality class, and we're teaching him about how he can take some pills so he can chop off his genitals and he can get surgery to add on breasts. Yeah, and they're not telling the parents. That's a problem. I have a problem with that. Now, this case went through the lower courts, and the parents lost. Because while these things are happening, no one denies it, this is happening. The schools are doing this behind parents' backs. These programs, this gender identity propaganda is being pushed down the throats of kids. That is happening, but it's not in writing. The Democrats didn't write it down. It isn't official. It's not a policy that came from the governor on down. So it's just what they do. There's nothing in writing. They tell kids verbally all about this stuff. They tell them, don't tell your parents, and it's a secret, and it's okay, and we're going to do this, and you need to know this information. Don't tell your parents about it, but nothing is written down on paper. Since nothing is on paper, then it's not an official policy, so the parents can't sue the schools. They lost. The parents said, but no one's denying this. You know it's true. You know it's happening. I know it's happening. I found out. I've caught you, and you got to stop doing this. So the parents appealed. And that appeal led it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court just announced, and this was from Justice Alito, said we can't do anything. We can't. The Supreme Court cannot look at this. The Supreme Court can't talk about the case. This gender identity propaganda case. And I'm really upset about this. And I think Justice Thomas and Alito, and I think there was one other, Alito and Thomas and Gorsuch. Yes, that's it, Neil Gorsuch. I think they were all very upset because they said, look, we'd be interested in this, but we can't do it because that's a state issue. That's the problem. It's a state issue. It's not federal. This isn't breaking a federal law. And because it's not breaking a federal law, the Supreme Court, they don't get to make a decision about it. If it was federal, if there was a federal law that was being broken, if the federal government had to be involved, then the Supreme Court, absolutely, they would be involved. They would be arguing this case. But it's not. It's a state issue. So I'm upset that the Supreme Court isn't taking on gender identity, but I understand why. Because at the very beginning, at the root of this, the teachers knew that if they put anything down on paper, if they actually wrote this down, what this propaganda, this gender identity warping of young children's minds, if they actually put it on paper, they would be in trouble. They would get sued and they would lose their jobs, and the state would be forced to change their policy if they ever wrote it on paper. So they never wrote it down because they knew they were wrong. They knew they were not helping children. They knew they were destroying families and these young kids' lives, and they didn't want to be caught. They didn't want to be held accountable. So they never put it down on paper. And that means that the Supreme Court can't make a decision because it's a state issue, not a federal issue. And a lot of people may have missed that. And I think there's a bunch of people that are out there with the teachers unions, and they're like, see, the Supreme Court, they know that gender identity is a good thing. Gender identity is great, and they don't have any problem. It doesn't break any law. That's not true. I just want to make sure people understand that. And I want to make sure that that's one of the things I wanted to make sure of, and why I mentioned this. It's not that the Supreme Court or any court has said that gender identity, teachers pushing gender identity theories onto children, no one has said that's illegal or not. No government has come out and said, well, you know what, this is a good thing and we should be doing this. No one said that. The Supreme Court did not say, oh, gender identity is legal. What they said is it didn't break federal law, so they can't look at it. And the states are saying, you didn't put it down you didn't write it down. It's not written anywhere, so that's not a policy. Therefore, we can't hold them accountable. No one has said it's good. No one said that that's approved. They said it's not written down, so I can't enforce something against that policy. And the Supreme Court said it's not federal. But the left will tell you, see, the Supreme Court, the state, they're all in favor of gender identity politics being taught to children. No, they didn't say that, and that isn't true. And anyone who says that to you is lying, and they have an agenda. They're trying to poison your mind. All right, so I wanted to mention that. And final thing tonight. By the way, Joel says, I like Nancy Mace. I like Nancy Mace. Republican South Carolina, and her efforts on the entire trans situation. I like her for a lot of reasons. Nancy Mace has been pretty good on a few things. Oh no, my paisano Alito. Yeah. Well, he wasn't wrong. I mean, again, he wasn't wrong in why he said this. There is a reason why there's a separation of state and federal responses. But I want to talk about one of my favorite people. And then I'll end the show after this. Oh, it's only an hour and a half. But yeah, we're getting close to that. So, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And I know I always screw up her name. I sometimes call her Ketanji Jackson Brown. But Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court justice who does not know if she is a woman or not. These are her words during her review on whether she would get the job. She doesn't know if she's a woman or not. These were her words. She's not a biologist. She doesn't know what a woman is, so she doesn't know if she's a woman or not. Can't prove it. She doesn't know. One of my favorite Supreme Court justices, because she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. She is miserable at the job. She is so bad that she has been called out twice now by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and by Elena Kagan. It was Sotomayor. They both said that what she was writing is an embarrassment. She is an activist pretending to be a Supreme Court justice. Ketanji Brown Jackson was hired because she is a DEI hire. Now, I know a lot of people go, Mike, but she's a judge and she was an attorney. She's smart. I didn't say she was stupid. And if you think that everyone who is a DEI hire is stupid, you don't understand what that is, what that whole policy is. One, it doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you're unqualified. There is a big difference between being unqualified because you're stupid and being unqualified because you don't know how to do the job. There's a big difference between that. Ketanji Brown Jackson is an intelligent woman. I have never argued against that. I think let me clarify that. I think she's motivated by her politics first. She is an activist first. She doesn't care about the law. She only cares about the law being used to promote her activism. She will use the law and the Constitution, anything, to promote her political ideology, which is what she was hired for. She was hired because she is black and she is a woman and she's a Democrat and she was a judge. And finally, because she was young. And I know you look at her and you look at Ketanji Brown Jackson and you say to yourself, she's not really that young. She isn't young. As you and I, human beings walking down the street, she's not really that young. But as a judge, she is young. She can be a Supreme Court justice for the next 20, maybe 30 years. And that is why she got hired, because she's black and she's a Democrat and she's an activist and she's a woman, a judge, and young. That's why she got it. All the check boxes. By the way, you can go back in time, look at her. They were picking when Joe Biden was forced to pick her. He said he wasn't going to pick the best person. He wanted to pick the best black woman. Well, that means you're exclusionary. You have limited the field of people. There may be brilliant white or black women or men or Hispanics or Chinese individuals who are judges, and they're brilliant, and some of them might even be Democrats, and none of them count because they're not a black woman. Well, now you've narrowed the field way down. In fact, the number of people who are capable of being hired under the limited definition by Joe Biden on who was going to be the next Supreme Court justice, it was a list of 11 women. That's it. And when you took into account the age restriction, it went down to 3. Only 3 judges were able to fit that narrow description that Joe Biden made to become Supreme Court justice. And Ketanji Brown Jackson was the youngest, so they picked her. She is an activist. She isn't a Supreme Court justice. She's not a judge. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. Now, the reason why I'm picking on her is there is a case that is out right now. This is Louisiana versus Calais. And essentially, the state of Louisiana, the Democrats, are saying, we need racism. We're using racism to change the electoral map, the congressional map of Louisiana, because Democrats want to have more of an advantage. It's kind of like what they do here in New York, what they're doing in Texas, what they do in California. They change the maps for the political party that's in power, and they want to maintain their power. So they want to get as many of their districts as they can so that they have a better chance of winning. Okay. And so in Louisiana, 1/3 of Louisiana is black. About 1/3 of Louisiana is black people. And about 1/3 of registered voters in Louisiana are black people. That's just the numbers. About 60% of the population is white, and about 62% of registered voters are white. Black people, they're about 30% of the population, and about 32%, 32%, it's right in the middle of the registered voters. So you would think that, okay, seems fair. No, Democrats are like, that's not fair. So there's one big district that happens to be mostly black, and they're like, yay, that's a Democrat seat. It's kind of racist to say it's a black district, so therefore it's a Democrat district. That's racist. You're saying that black people are monolithic. They don't have a choice. If you're black, you're a Democrat. You don't get to choose. That is racist. So the Democrats in Louisiana are being racist. Big shock to people in the South. I know. Democrats that are racist. Who knew? Okay, but that being said, they want another district. They want to redo the maps, and they want to give the black Democrats another district. Another district. Why? Because they're black. What? Because they're black, they have to get another district because it's unfair. They don't have enough districts because they're black. That sounds stupid to me. That's not a reason. It's not like, oh, but black people, they're going to register more if they have more congressional districts. That's a lie. No, they won't. That's not true. And you can say, well, they're only at 30% of the registered voters. They're only 30% of the population. It's perfectly in line. They're 30% of the population, 30% of the vote. Okay, if they were 60% of the vote and they had 30% of representation, I'd say, yeah, something seems to be off there. No, they're right in line. So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's that there's not enough blacks voting Democrat. That's the truth. There are not enough black people voting Democrat. And to make more black people vote Democrat, they're going to put in another black district. And that's why this case is going to court. This is why it's going to the Supreme Court. And they're being argued right now. Because the argument is, well, no, but if you don't do that, that's racist. If you don't make 2 black districts for some reason, then it's racist. And the other side, the Republicans are saying, but you've got 30% of the population, 30% of the registered voters. What's the problem? Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. But that's why it's in front of the Supreme Court. Now, all of that, you can argue either side. You can say you agree with it, you disagree with it. That's perfectly fine. The part that gets me upset, the part that's important, is Ketanji Brown Jackson. She's arguing with the government. She's arguing with the attorney, who's the Republican, who's going with the Republican side and says, you don't need to make another black district. That's racist. Because we've already done the numbers, we've already done the math, and it works out that there's one black district because that's just the way people are. They live in that area. It's mostly a black population. That's how it worked out. And Ketanji, and the thing that gets me is the woman who is supposed to be a Supreme Court justice says, no, you're wrong. She comes out and says, your case has no merit. You have to make another district for black people. She's already made a decision. She's already decided the case. She's supposed to be listening to the arguments. She's supposed to listen to both sides. She's supposed to hear the cases and then look at the law. And in a conversation with the other 7 members of the Supreme Court, sit down and discuss with them what the law says and what it means, and to determine if that is the right thing to do. But Ketanji Brown Jackson has already said it's racist if you don't do what she wants. She has already made up her mind. She has already told everyone in this discussion that she says, if you don't do what I want, it's racism. You have to do this. You have to do this. Even though there's no evidence, apparently, that says that they should do this. And that's what upsets me, because she's being an activist. And she is speaking to the juries, to the attorneys, the people presenting these cases as an activist, not a Supreme Court judge. She isn't asking about how does the law work? How is it being enacted? Has the law lived up to the expectations of the people who passed that law? Has it helped black people get to vote and to make sure that if they want to vote, they can vote? Is it doing that? And if the answer is yes, it's doing that, that answers the question underlying. She's not doing any of that. She's like, I'm an activist. I want more black districts because they're black, not because it's good for them being able to vote. It's not because someone did something to them. She just wants it because she's black and she wants more black districts. That's racist. So not only is Ketanji Brown Jackson, not only has she proven herself to be an activist instead of a Supreme Court justice, she's also a racist on the Supreme Court. And no one wants to call her out because she's black and a female. Screw that. I call it out. She is a DEI hire and a racist. She is an activist, and she is ruining the Supreme Court. I'm not telling you that Supreme Court justices don't make up their mind before they get a case, before they start arguments, before they start listening to the arguments. I'm not going to tell you that they don't make up their mind. I'm sure many of them do. They don't tell you that. They don't go into the hearing and tell you, I'm a racist. I've already made up my mind. I'm an activist. They don't walk into the room doing that. Because at least they're smart enough to uphold the justice, at least the image of the impartiality of our justice system. Ketanji Brown Jackson has no understanding of the justice system, the trust and faith in our government. She's an activist. She's a racist. She wants something purely because of the racism of it. And that's it. God help us. We deserve someone better on the Supreme Court. Now, if anyone disagrees with me on that, I'd like to hear why. But let's see. Phil says, I wish Ketanji Brown Jackson would have just pursued her dream of being an actor on Broadway. She wanted to be an actor? Really? Okay. By the way, actors, there is no difference between a politician and an actor. An activist is an actor every time. So she is living her dream, just not on Broadway. Shelley says, when they target black voters, what else are they willing to target? Well, that's the point. And they're using the affirmative action laws, essentially, or the equality in voting laws, EOV. They're using that to say, well, we have to have more black voters. We have to have more black districts. If it is unfair, if the district doesn't have any, so if all the districts are white and there's a population in that state, say like in Louisiana, if a third of the state is black and there's no black districts, that seems unfair. It isn't necessarily, depends on how the population is spread out across the state. And if the urban area, if the big city in Louisiana, say like New Orleans, is mostly black, and every other part of the county and the community is white surrounding them, okay, and that could be a white district, even though there's a large city full of black people. But yeah, the rest of the county, the rest of the district, if there's 100,000 black people here, but 600,000 people in the congressional district are white, it's a white district. Maybe it doesn't go Democrat. Maybe it doesn't go black. Maybe. But fine. The way the law is set up, you have to have, if you have a population, that's over like 10%, there has to be at least one black district. Okay. It's racial. It's racism. That doesn't have anything to do with Democrat or Republican. I don't know why. But okay, fine. They got that. I don't know how that helps anyone per se. In 2025, it doesn't have the same impact that it would have in, say, 1960. But okay, why two? Why do you need a second one? If all the conditions are met with the first one, the second one is a luxury. It's an extension. It is racism. If you're forcing it to happen, it's racism. She wants racism. Let me see. Shelley goes on to say, New York has been gerrymandered all over the place, but they target Democrats or Republicans depending on who was gerrymandering. Well, usually since 1958, that would be Democrats. She goes on to say, gerrymandering by skin tone is new to me. New York is usually first at being the worst. In the South, and this is true since about since the late 1950s, early 1960s, with the Civil Rights Movement, the government passed the Equality in Voting Acts. Basically, it's affirmative action for voting. And that only really affected the southern states. So you could say Texas, kinda, but mostly places like Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana. Those are the states that really have this affecting them. You never hear about this in North Dakota. You don't hear about it in Iowa. You don't hear it here in the Northeast. You don't hear about it in Vermont. No one cares about this in New Jersey. It's not applicable. This is a holdover in part from the Jim Crow laws and in part from the affirmative action of the 1960s. So that's why you don't hear about it. When people talk about gerrymandering, it's almost always going to be Republicans versus Democrats straight up. That's all it is. Right now in California, they're going to redistrict. It's Republicans versus Democrats. And it's the Democrats trying to get back some of the votes they're going to lose in Texas because Texas was redistricting. And so that's going to mean Republican. They're going to punish the Republicans for Texas by making sure that California is more Democrat. It's just a stupid game. It has nothing to do with the public. It isn't about helping the public at all. It's about political power of the two parties. That's it. That's all it is. It's the political power of the two parties. It has nothing to do with the individual civilians. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with anything except political power. And they tell you, but they'll tell you, no, but we're trying to help you. No, you're not. We're trying to protect the people. No, you're not. You're doing this for political power. I wish they would at least be honest enough to just say, yeah, we just want power in the state. Okay. I can at least understand and respect that. No, they're lying to everyone. Okay. Let's see here. And Phil says she was talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was featured in a Broadway play after she got on the bench. Well, Mayor Koch, I know it's old. You weren't alive, Phil, when Mayor Koch was the mayor of New York City. Mayor Koch was in a couple of plays. There were plays that were going on. He would have a role every so often because he was the mayor of New York, and he was beloved. He was the beloved mayor of New York. Mayor Koch actually ran as both a Democrat and as a Republican for the mayor of New York, and he won as a Democrat and as a Republican. That's someone who really was loved by the people and did a good job for New York. And he, occasionally, someone would write a play and they'd have a bit character that would come on to the stage and do a little line or two. That was often Mayor Koch. So I don't blame her for someone saying, I'm so excited, I'm so happy, I think it's so beloved that you got to be a DE hire activist on the Supreme Court. I could see some leftists saying, I've got to put you in my play. That's great. And if you're just a judge, you would say no. Because they're not supposed to be superstars. They're not celebrities. They're not entertainers. And if they are being an entertainer, if they're being a celebrity, that is killing their impartiality. It weakens, it lessens them. It makes being a justice of the Supreme Court, much less important, much less of a pinnacle. It's less credibility. And that's what Ketanji Brown Jackson did. She goes up on Broadway. She's making a mockery of being a Supreme Court justice. She's diminishing her role because she never thought it was important. She's an activist first, not a Supreme Court justice. She's not a critical member of the United States government, the third branch of government, balancing out the other parts. No. She's an activist who's trying to unbalance the system to get a political advantage for her side, her political beliefs. I don't know. Maybe that's the way I see it. I don't know. I think that's accurate. I think I'm explaining it well, I think, but I may not be. All right. But here it is. It's 10:20 Eastern Standard Time. We've been on for an hour and 51 minutes. I'm going to let this go to 10 minutes, 9 minutes. I got 9 minutes. I know some people are watching, but with 9 minutes left, I'll take any questions you guys may have. I hope you found some of this to be interesting and informative. I will add links after the show to the description so you can see some of the articles that I'm talking about, showing you the case that's being decided by the Supreme Court, the comments by the activist Ketanji Brown Jackson, to show you the words of Chris Miller, and to show you the gender identity case that the Supreme Court Justice Alito did not take, and to also address the political article on the young Republicans. So let's see. Shelley says, aren't the majority of judges in our nation behaving as activists when they refuse to bring justice to the people? To a degree, but most of the time, I think you're mixing some of the things. If you're saying the DA, the district attorneys, or the attorney general, that are they being activists when they have the justice reform, the revolving door, where they're not charging people because of the color of their skin, so they don't get everyone doesn't get charged for the crimes that they may have committed, or they get out on cashless bail for the crimes that they just committed, so they can re-offend and commit that crime again and again. That's kind of like the guy in the Carolina who stabbed Irina Zartuska and stabbed her 22 times in the neck on the subway. Yeah, he was in jail, 15 times? 15 times. Only arrested once. Only was in jail once. Had 15 arrests in and out the door, in and out the door. And he's not the only one. We've heard of cases where people had 20 or 30 arrests over and over and over again, and being released by these judges. When the judges are releasing them, yes, some of them are being activists, but the DAs and the attorney generals, they're the problem in the first place. They're the ones who are saying they're changing the standards for the state. They're unbalancing the justice system. They're allowing crimes to go unpunished. They're telling criminals it's okay if you have the right skin tone, if you have the right political belief, if you have the right ideology, then you can commit a crime too. They're encouraging certain people to commit more crimes because they will not enforce the law against those people, like illegal aliens. But in the times that that person is arrested and the charge has been made, then it's on the judge, and sometimes the judge can be an activist. It's called being legislating from the bench. That's what it's actually called. There's a term for it, legislating from the bench. It's when a judge decides that they're going to make up their own laws from their courtroom. And we see that sometimes. We see that a lot with the immigration law, where judges make up their own rules about legal or illegal immigration. Or in New York State, in terms of the Second Amendment, we see that a lot. Dexter Taylor's judge said that the Second Amendment doesn't apply in her courtroom. That's making up her own laws. That's just legislating from the bench. It is illegal. It is, if you can prove it, it's illegal, and it's a corruption of our government. So yes, if they get to the courtroom, yes, being an activist is it is unjust, but it's proving that that's a bit hard to do. That's the hard part. But yes, that is true. Let me see here. We just had a burst of people jump on in. Fantastic. Let's see. Grace says, is there any justice expected to retire while Trump is the president? No. As far as I understand, Donald Trump should go through his entire term and nobody should leave. I believe the next Supreme Court justice that is expected to retire because of old age or die would probably be Elena Kagan. Kagan would be the next Supreme Court justice to be replaced. She's one of the Democrats. So she's going to try and last until the next Democrat can be reelected. But that was the same thing that Ruth Bader Ginsburg tried to do. And that's when she died under a Republican. And that's why we see that the court is the way it is right now. That led to Amy Coney Barrett getting onto the Supreme Court because of basically Ruth Bader Ginsburg not retiring under Obama when she could have, and instead trying to hold out for a better president and dying before she could get there. And you may see the same thing with Elena Kagan, where she's going to hold out as long as possible until she can get to another Democrat president, which might be in 2032 or perhaps 2036 if we're going by current numbers. And can she survive that long? Don't think so. But will it be under Donald Trump at the by 2028? I don't think so. No, I do not think that's going to be the case. So, yeah, Trump should not have another choice at Supreme Court justice. Amy says, I'm hearing everything you're saying. Okay, good. That's good. Let's see. Phil. Oh, he mentions that Grace had a great question. I love Clarence Thomas, but I hope he retires while the Republicans have an opportunity to replace him. Unlikely. Again, if you're looking at being under Donald Trump in 2028, unlikely. If you're talking like 2032, possibly. Right around 2032 might be a very big year, depending on who's running and what the environment is there. 2031, 2033, something like that, right in that range, 2031 to 2033. We could see a lot of, we could see 3 Supreme Court justices seats switch. We could see them retire and new people be put in. So it's going to be very important on who wins in 2028 and who wins in 2032, because they may, if it's the same person or different people, depends, but it could be like, say, J.D. Vance. If he wins in 28, he could also win in 32. So you would have the same president through that 8-year period, and he would have an opportunity in that case to replace 3 Supreme Court justices. But say J.D. Vance wins in 2028, but for some reason he doesn't run or loses in 2032 and Democrat wins. Well, you could see J.D. Vance having 2 Supreme Court picks in his time, and the Supreme Court justice, the Democrat, would have 1. And that's how you could see that change out. So it could be in the next 7 years, you could see 3 Supreme Court justices switch. So I hope that answers your question, Phil. Let me see. I'm just kind of. Hey, Ganjin. Good to see you there. Ganjin says, had to take a month hiatus for politics for my mental health. I understand completely. I'm, even though I don't take off time like that, about once a year I take off a weekend. And the way I get through it, since I've been doing this for 20 years and I do the shows on a regular basis, what I usually do is I take off a day or two for myself personally. And I just try and relax. I have like 1 or 2 days off, and then I get back into it. But I understand it can get overwhelming for some people if you're just in this all the time. You have to have another hobby. You have to have something that you love to do besides politics. For me, it's video games, but for some people, it's playing football or going out and touching grass or whatever it may be. Let's see. Shelley says you should go on the Sharp Way with Larry and Curtis Sliwa and interview them. That would be a great show. Curtis will not go on to the Sharp Way with Larry and me. No, he won't do that. He might be interviewed by Larry, but he wouldn't be interviewed by me. I wouldn't be able to do that. And I have spoken to Curtis Sliwa about 4 times on the record, 4 times in this year. I believe I've taped them all, but I haven't had a chance to actually have a formal interview, which for me, that's about an hour. I haven't had that. I would love to have it. Haven't had it. Longest I've talked to him one-on-one was about 20 minutes. And that was an unexpected event. I wasn't prepped for it. He wasn't either. We only got about 3, maybe 4 questions that I was able to ask, but he did answer them. But yeah, that would be a good show, though. It would be interesting. It would definitely be very interesting. I don't know that Sleewood would say yes, though. Okay, Thomas is the best. Ganjan says, I took up playing pool. That is fantastic. What kind of stick do you use? Do you have your own breakdown stick? I used to play semi-professional. I used to have a lot of awards. I had like 8 awards for playing pool. I can play with one hand about as well as most people play with 2. That's not me being bold. That's just true. My teams that I've played for in Central New York will tell you that's true. It's a pretty good pool player. I would usually use a 20 or a 21 stick. I like a heavy stick. It just makes it easier for me to hit. And even with my light touches, it's pretty good. I know a lot of people like 18s. I think that's just way too light. And a 22 is just way too heavy. I'd like a 20. I used to have 2 custom made sticks that were 20 and a half ounces each. That for me is a sweet spot. So I hope if you're playing pool again, I hope you're enjoying it. I would recommend using like a 2021 for your stick. And if you are serious about it, do get yourself a glove. You'll know what I mean. The glove for the sticks, and also to use a breakdown stick that's about a 20 and a half. I always found that to be like the best. Let's see here. Oh, Sally says she did see my interview with Curtis Sliwa. I thought it was pretty good, considering it was last minute and unexpected. Yes, playing pool is it used to be very relaxing. I played in a lot of tournaments. It can be very nerve-wracking. I went to Vegas. I actually went to Vegas in a tournament, and that was not relaxing at all. So it's like doing this. It's like doing this, but I do love playing pool. I do. Oh, you got a Valhalla. Okay. 19 ounce. If you're going to use a breaking cue and it's going to be different than your main cue, which is not a bad idea. A lot of people like that. I think it's good too. You want to have something like a 21 and a half. You want a nice big heavy, because you're going to slam and you're going to put all your body weight into it. And it's about the motion of your whole body. It's not just your arm. You really want to put your body into that breaking motion so that you've got all that momentum and power behind it when it breaks. And just make sure you have the right spin on the ball so it doesn't fly off the table. But that's another thing altogether. I'd say 21 and a half for a breaking stick. Could I do a fundraiser at the pool hall? Yes, I could. That's called gambling. I'd get arrested, but I can do it. Actually, last time I was in New York City and I was playing pool in New York City. It was me and one other guy. We were gambling. Yeah. And I nearly had my thumbs broken. I won, but I nearly got my thumbs broken. I literally ended the night going 3 games in a row, going double or nothing, double or nothing, double or nothing. And I wasn't the one losing. Yeah, and they were pissed. They were pissed. Double or nothing 3 times in a row. I had a nice night. That was a good night for me, except for, being threatened to have my thumbs broken. But other than that, it was great. I like this question. Phil goes, what is the best pool movie and why is it The Hustler? Funny, Phil. Well, and yes, positioning is one of the most critical things to master in pool, which is why it's about how you hit the ball, not necessarily that you hit the ball. It's where you want to leave yourself. The best pool players, if you watch them, when they make a hit, it's not just I'm dropping this ball, but I'm also having the cue set up for the next shot afterwards. The really best people not only can knock the ball in, object ball in first, have the cue go somewhere they want it to go, but if it doesn't, because it doesn't always, that they can readjust as if it didn't matter. They had 2 or 3 different options for every ball on the table, no matter how it goes. So if something goes a little bit wrong, they're still perfectly fine on their next shot. It's great. I love watching some of the best in the pool. I'm good. I'm very good for a non-professional. I'm not good enough to be professional, but I am close. Okay. So people are talking about raising money. I'm not running for an elected office. I can't do a fundraiser, or rather, well, I suppose I could fundraise for my channel. I guess we could do a fundraiser in a pool hall. Guess we could do that for No Soundbites Allowed. Try and raise money for me. I would love that, but we'll work it out. All right, folks. Oh God, Gungeon, you're almost right. I think a couple of racks ahead. No, think it's not just 3 balls ahead. Think a couple of racks ahead. Makes a big difference. Color and Money was a decent movie too. That was decent. But you rarely see real pool playing. You see tricks. Almost always they want to put a trick into the pool. When they show pool being played on movies, it's almost always about the tricks. It's really not. It should, just watching someone who's good is just as entertaining as watching someone do tricks. Tricks are fun, but if you see someone do a trick, do you really trust that you're going to be able to have an easy, fair game with them? No. You're going to be thinking that, this is a setup and you can't possibly win, and no one wants to gamble with them. You want to play with someone who's good enough to play with you, but that you can beat, that you actually have a chance with. So that's why I didn't like Color. Some of these movies just don't get it right. But anyway. All right. We've been on for 2 hours. It's a little bit later. It's a Wednesday night. I hope people had the opportunity to see the show and enjoy it. I hope it made it thought-provoking to hear about some of these stories and to hear a side of the story that isn't the mainstream approved message. Please, if you want to, chop it up and send it to your friends, let them see it so they can then consider some of these things for themselves to make their own decisions about. Please like, share, subscribe. I really would appreciate that. I really would thank you for that. Because that helps the channel. Like I said, we can get to 5,000, 10,000 subscribers. I can definitely get Curtis Leewood to come on to the channel and to do an interview. I'm pretty sure I can get Zoran Mandami to come on and to do an interview on this channel, and many, many other politicians as well. I thank everyone. I want you to have a great night. Keep playing pool. Enjoy the movies. Enjoy your time. And I will see you again throughout the week and on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we do our full regular show starting at 2:30 p.m. I will talk to you again very soon.